In the beginning, there is not a battlefield, but a quiet and a widening. Before spears, before thunder, before the names that would later be whispered in poems and prayers, there is only a kind of open depth the poets call chaos. Chaos is not yet destruction, it is gap, yawn, the unshaped space where forms might someday stand. In that almost soundless vastness, the first presences arrive like slow, deliberate breaths. From chaos comes Gaia, the broad earth, solid where chaos is not. Her presence is weight and contour, the feeling of something underfoot, where before there had been only a fall. She is not merely soil or stone, but the whole layered fullness of ground and mountain and fertile plain. In her, stillness becomes capacity. She can carry rivers and forests. She can bear children. With her appear others. There is Tartaros, the deep pit far below, a kind of echo of chaos drawn inward and down, a prison and a boundary that is also a presence. There is Eros, desire and the binding impulse that pulls beings together, slow and quiet and essential. Night takes shape from darkness. Day will eventually follow from light. These are not yet gods in temples, but conditions of being. They are the first order in which anything at all can occur. Gaia, patient and heavy with potential, does not remain alone. From herself, without a consort, she brings forth Uranus, the sky who arches above her. Uranus is not a gentle blue dome, but a living vault that presses close. He covers her completely. He is star fleck and air, the high chill, the unreachable roof against which storms may one day gather. When he stretches himself across her, earth and sky form a pair so tightly joined that nothing between them can move freely without effort. From that union the Titans are born. They are not yet the cruel rulers sung about in later ages, but first-generation powers, vast and solemn, each reflecting an aspect of the world. Oceanus, who will encircle the earth with a river that is almost like a boundary. Cuus and Creus, whose names recall axis and ram, ideas of direction and leadership. Hyperion, associated with the high path of the sun. Iapetus, who will father figures of forethought and rashness. Thea, of shining things. Themis, of right order. Mnemosyne, of memory. Phoebe, of bright intelligence. Tethys, of the nourishing waters. Rhea, who will one day be called Mother of Gods. Gaia bears also other children who do not sit easily in the light. The Cyclopes come forth, craftsmen with a single eye that sees the core of burning flame. The 100-handers take shape as well. The Hecatoncheires, beings of such excessive strength that each of their 100 arms is a kind of silent threat and promise. Their very existence suggests what the world might need to resist future storms. The world is not yet settled. Earth and sky cling too closely. Uranus, ever stretched across Gaia, feels their children as a weight and a risk. In some accounts, he presses them back into her depths, refusing to allow them to emerge fully. In others, he casts the more fearsome among them down into Tartaros, the deep pit, sealing them away in darkness. The Cyclopes and 100-handers vanish from the bright surface of Gaia's body and fall into a region that feels like a muffled heartbeat far below. The first pattern appears. Power arrives, power fears, power imprisons. A parent looks at children and sees not continuation but potential rival. The world learns that generational time can also be a sequence of refusals. Gaia, who has borne these children and feels their confinement like a pressure within her, experiences a kind of suffocation. She is earth, so her suffering is patient, but it is not endless. The silence of Tartaros is heavy with voices that cannot speak, and Gaia begins to plan. The Titans are still young, each colossal and strong, and she moves among them with a purpose that is both maternal and political. She shapes a tool from her own substance, a sickle with a long handle and a blade of keen adamant, stronger than the metals that will later be known. She sets it before her children and speaks, not in a shout, but in the steady tone of one who has weighed consequences for aeons. Someone must stand against Uranus. Someone must transform the relationship between earth and sky. Someone must accept the burden of being the first to strike a parent. The Titans listen. Some look away. Oceanus, who will prefer the long circling routes of water, does not step forward. Coeus, Creus, Hyperion, and Iapetus hesitate. To lift a hand against the sky is to change more than a family. It is to alter the pattern of the world. Only Kronos, the youngest of the Titans, steps forward with a clear, hard gaze. His name will later be associated with time, with the slow grinding of ages and the consuming passage of generations. For now he is simply the one who accepts Gaia's plan. He takes up the sickle. He agrees to lie in wait for Uranus. When the sky descends upon the earth again, close and heavy as always, Kronos strikes. Texts hint at the moment, some more plainly than others, but here the blow can be understood without lingering over its physical detail. The strike separates, it cuts sky from earth. It wounds the old order in a way that cannot be repaired. Uranus recoils. The vault withdraws upward. Space opens between heaven and earth where air and light and future movement may exist. In that separation, the world changes. The sky still arches above, but it no longer smothers every peak and valley. The earth rises with mountains and forests that can breathe. There is new room for other beings, for rivers and animals, and much later for mortal lives. Kronos takes up rule among the Titans. The age that follows will be remembered in some traditions as a golden age, a time when humans, if they are imagined at all, live simply close to the gods, without harsh toil. Yet beneath that calm surface there is already a pattern repeating. The eyed, wounded Uranus, retreating sky, speaks a quiet curse to his son. He says that what has been done will be done again. Just as Kronos has turned against his father, so a child of Kronos will eventually rise and overthrow him. The words do not change the present immediately, but they plant a seed of unease. Prophecy and myth is not merely prediction. It is a pressure that shapes choices long before the event arrives. Kronos hears. Gaia hears. The other Titans hear. The golden age under Kronos is, from its earliest days, shadowed by the knowledge that it will not last. The rule of Kronos is marked by stability and fear woven together. He sits as king of the Titans, with Rhea as his consort. The world is orderly. Seasons move in a gentle circle. The soil is generous. There are no great wars, no iron weapons, no cities as mortals will later understand them. The very calmness of the age is part of its memory. Yet beneath the stillness, Kronos is watching the horizon of his own family. When his first child is conceived, the prophecy of Uranus stirs in his mind. A son who will rise against him. A daughter who might give that son strength. The possibility of betrayal is not abstract, because he has enacted it himself. He has raised his hand against his father. He knows the shape betrayal can take. To avoid the fate Uranus named, Kronos chooses a response that is as absolute as it is quiet. Each time Rhea bears a child, Kronos takes the infant in his arms. The names that could have been sung in praise are whispered instead in fear. Hestia, firstborn, goddess of hearth and the steady flame. Demeter, who will one day tend to grain and the cyclical life of the fields. Hera, future queen of the gods, guardian of marriage and solemn oaths. Hades, associated with the unseen realm of the dead. Poseidon, tied to the deep, shifting sea. Each child appears small and full of possibility, and each is swallowed by Kronos. The swallowing is often described simply. The child vanishes into the belly of the Titan. There is no prolonged struggle, no drawn-out scene of cruelty. The act is swift and total. In this way, Kronos believes he keeps the prophecy at bay. If his children never grow, never stand outside him, they can never raise their hands as he once raised his hand. The world above remains peaceful. The golden age continues. Inside the Lord of the Titans, however, potential is held like a pressure that will one day require release. Rhea stands between husband and children, watching the pattern repeat. She is mother, goddess of fertility and flow, and every loss strikes not only as grief, but as a kind of cosmic imbalance. Her children are not dead. They are hidden, contained, unable to take their place in the order of things. The hearth has no guardian in the open. The fields have no watchful patron. The seas have no lord in the sky's councils. The bonds that will later enclose marriage and oaths have not yet found their rightful keeper. Rhea's sorrow grows with each birth. In some telling, she flees to her parents, Gaia and Uranus, to seek counsel. The very earth and the distant sky listen as she speaks about the cycle that has taken root in her house. Gaia, who once plotted against an oppressive husband for the sake of her children, recognizes the pattern with a kind of weary clarity. Another son must be hidden. Another plan must move quietly under the surface of declared power. When Rhea is pregnant again, she withdraws to a place of secrecy. In many accounts, this is the island of Crete, in a cave that opens within the slopes of a high mountain, sometimes called Dicta, sometimes Ida. The cave is cool and dim, with the sound of water dripping from stone. Outside, trees move in soft wind. Within, Rhea gives birth far from the eyes of Kronos. The child is Zeus. Zeus arrives not as an instant thunderer, but as an infant with the same vulnerability as his swallowed siblings. Fate, however, settles differently around him. Rhea cannot bear to see this one taken. At Gaia's urging, she swaddles the child, then wraps a stone in similar cloth. When Kronos demands the newborn, she gives him the stone instead. Kronos, intent on preserving his rule and trusting that no one would dare deceive him, swallows the bundle without examining it closely. The deception is complete. Zeus remains hidden. The prophecy is given new room. The cave where Zeus grows becomes a small, bright center of the world. Nymphs attend to him, figures like Adrasteia and Ida nursing him in secret. A goat called a Malthea offers her milk. Bees bring honey. The Curetes, armored youths or spirits, perform a strange, rhythmic dance outside, clashing their shields and stamping their feet to drown out the sound of the child's cries. Each gesture is a form of restraint. None of them attack Kronos directly. They move carefully around his awareness, muffling, disguising, delaying. Zeus grows quickly as gods do. The cave is his cradle and his school. He learns the feel of stone underhand, the patterns of shadows on the walls, the change in air when storms pass over the mountain. He hears stories about his siblings, about the Titan king who holds them inside his great body, about the earlier revolt against Uranus. The knowledge is given to him in calm, measured tones. He learns that power can be used to confine as well as to shelter. He learns that the world he knows is already the second iteration of a pattern. In that knowledge, another pattern begins. A son hears about the father he must one day face. While Zeus grows in secrecy, the world continues to move under Kronos' rule. Rivers carve their paths, forests thicken. Giants born from the blood of Uranus that fell on Gaia emerge in distant regions, towering and restless. From sea foam, stirred by that same old wound, Aphrodite will someday arise. But that moment belongs to another part of the story. For now, the Golden Age persists, and mortals, if they are imagined, live without iron tools. And without war, their lifespans long and their concerns small compared to the great currents humming underneath. Zeus's hidden years are a kind of apprenticeship in caution. He is not yet the open lord of sky and thunder. He is a wanderer in confined spaces, moving through mountain paths and shadowed groves, learning where to step and where to pause. The zoom of the story narrows from cosmic separation to the quiet of a cave, to the intimacy of a young god listening to the heartbeat of a goat and the far-off clatter of protective dancers. In this time, the structure outlined earlier takes shape around him. There is a problem. The unjust, fearful swallowing of children by a ruler clinging to power. There is a council, Gaia, Rhea, and those who keep Zeus informed of the world beyond his hiding place. There will be a sacrifice of safety, a moment when concealment is abandoned for action. There will be an avatar who embodies the new order. Zeus grows into that role almost without noticing. Each day he becomes more the figure who will eventually step into the open. The limits of Kronos' approach become clear. By swallowing his children, he has not removed them from existence. He has turned his own body into a kind of prison. The potential for a new world lives inside him, compressed and waiting. Prophecy in this case does not disappear when ignored. It coils as if in a confined space, gathering a pressure that will one day demand release. Zeus, as the one who remains outside that internal prison, is uniquely positioned to act on both sides of the boundary. He can move still in secret. He can also, when the time comes, open his father from the inside out. When Zeus comes of age, Gaia is said to approach him directly. The earth itself offers counsel, as it once did to Rhea. She instructs him in the quiet arts that will be required. Force alone is not yet the tool. First will come cunning. First will come a cup and a medicine. Zeus descends from his mountain refuge and makes his way to the halls of Kronos. He does not yet appear as a rebel with an army, but as a newcomer whose identity is not immediately recognized. In some versions, he serves as cupbearer, the one who mixes and pours the drinks for the king. The role is humble and close, like a spy's position in later tales. The great Titan, secure in his apparent victory over fate, allows the stranger to approach with flagons and bowls. The potion Gaia has taught Zeus to prepare is both gentle and decisive. It is a mixture that will not strike with violence but will loosen what has been held in place for too long. Zeus adds it to Kronos' drink. The Titan takes the cup, drinks deeply, and for a moment nothing seems to change. The hall is still. The other Titans are at ease. The familiar patterns of their golden age continue. Then Kronos begins to feel a movement within. The children he thought silenced stir in his depths. The potion acts not as poison, but as a key. One by one, the swallowed offspring are released, emerging into the world as if time had folded. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon come forth, whole and adult, their growth having occurred inside that strange confinement. The scene, often told quickly in mythic accounts, can be imagined as quiet astonishment rather than chaos. The brothers and sisters stand blinking in the light of a world that has waited for them. For a moment, there is no war. There is only the recognition of kin reunited. Zeus, who has acted as the instrument of their liberation, is finally seen by them as brother and ally. They have been held in the dark interior of Kronos for years beyond counting. He has been held in the narrow spaces of caves and mountain paths. Now they meet at last on the open ground of the world. The circle of future Olympians stands complete, and the balance of power shifts without a weapon yet being raised. Kronos, emptied of the children he tried to hide, stands facing the very beings he had feared. His attempt to avoid the prophecy has, through his own choices, intensified its certainty. He knows now that the threat is no longer abstract. Zeus is before him not as a baby to be swallowed, but as a fully formed god whose first act was to reverse the old king's most secret action. The siblings gather, and the quiet in the hall becomes a held breath, a pause before something larger. The liberation of the swallowed gods is only the first step. Zeus and his brothers and sisters are powerful, but they stand still in a world dominated by titans who have ruled since the fall of Uranus. Kronos has brothers who remain loyal. There are ancient forces in Tartaros whose allegiance is still uncertain. The sky, though freed long ago from the suffocating closeness to Earth, is not yet the undisputed realm of any single being. For the new order to take shape fully, Zeus will need allies beyond his immediate family. Gaia, who has watched all this unfold, directs Zeus's attention downward toward Tartaros. The Cyclopes and Hundred-Handers, imprisoned since the First Age, remain in that deep, sealed domain. They have been forgotten by many, yet their strength and craft endure. Zeus understands that to confront the Titans, he must undo not only his father's imprisonment of his siblings, but his grandfather's earlier confinement of these more fearsome children. The descent into Tartaros is not described in exact detail in the old poems, but it can be felt as a long inward journey. Zeus, accompanied by his brothers, approaches the edge of the world, where the earth thins and the great chasm opens. The air grows heavy and still. The bright dome of the sky seems far away. In the depths waits a realm bordered by iron gates and walls that even gods regard with respect. To enter Tartaros is to move into the underside of existence, into a place where time feels different, stretched and compressed at once. The Hundred-Handers are there, bound and confined, their many arms restrained, their vast bodies constrained in a darkness that remembers Uranus's fear, and Kronos' agreement with that fear. The Cyclopes remain as well, their single eyes dimmed by disuse, their craft idle, their forges cold. Zeus approaches as liberator, not as jailer. He unbinds the Hundred-Handers, breaking the restraints that have held them since before his birth. He releases the Cyclopes, allowing them once more to see the glow of molten matter and to shape it according to their skill. Gratitude in such beings is not expressed with words alone. They respond with gifts, each aligned to the nature of the one they address. To Zeus they give the thunderbolt, a spear of compressed storm that will later become his emblem. It is not only a weapon, it is the visible sign that sky and storm have chosen a bearer, that sound and light can be directed, restrained until needed, and then released with precision. To Poseidon they give the trident, the three-pronged implement that allows him to govern the seas, stirring waves or calming them as required. To Hades they give a helmet of invisibility, a cap that allows him to move unseen, to pass through the world without drawing attention, a fitting tool for the one who will preside over the unseen realm of the dead. These devices are not simple instruments of aggression. They are expressions of responsibility. The thunderbolt must be used sparingly, for each strike is a disruption. The The trident must balance the needs of calm harbors and necessary storms. The helm must protect the boundary between the living and the dead, ensuring that the hidden remains hidden until the proper time. In this way, the gifts carry within them the reminder that power remains always bound to restraint. The 100-handers, now free, pledge themselves to Zeus. Their many arms, once a source of terror, become the engine that will hurl massive stones in battle, that will destabilize the foundations of Titan strongholds. They are embodiments of excess strength put into service of a measured cause. With them beside him, Zeus shifts from a solitary, hidden child to the leader of a formidable alliance. On the surface world, word of these movements spreads slowly. Titans who had believed their rule eternal begin to sense an underlying tremor. Some, like Oceanus, remain distant, preferring the encircling flow of their own domain. Others, such as Iapetus, are drawn into the orbit of Kronos' fear. Within their household, sons are born who watch and listen, figures like Prometheus, whose name means forethought, and Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought. They will play their parts in later chapters of the world's unfolding, especially in dealings with mortals. For now, they serve as quiet witnesses to the growing tension. The council of the new gods assembles on high ground. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, and Hades stand together, not yet enclosed in marble temples or bound by the familiar symbols that will surround them in later cult. They are simply a family that has been swallowed, hidden, freed, and now must decide whether to accept a compromised coexistence or to step into open conflict. Their conclusion is shaped by the pattern that has carried them here. Injustice, repeated and concealed, has finally reached a point where it must be met not with more concealment, but with revelation. The threat at this stage of the story is clear. If Kronos and the other Titans remain in power, the world will remain locked into an order that suppresses new potential out of fear. The swallowed children will be only the first of many suppressed possibilities. Mortals, should they ever emerge in full awareness, will live under a sky ruled by a king whose instinct is to hold rather than to share. The ground they tread will carry the memory of suffocated siblings and silenced strength. The premise that drives what follows is simple and immense. The cosmos cannot remain forever in the pattern of the first rebellion. A second transformation must occur. The first was the separation of sky and earth. The second will be the reordering of divine rule around a different center. Zeus stands ready to become that center, not as a perfect figure beyond all flaw, but as a god whose very origin has taught him both the dangers of hoarding power and the necessity of decisive action. The stage for the Titanomachy is set. Titans loyal to Kronos gather on the high summit of Othrys, a mountain that stands as the seat of their strength. The new gods take their place on Olympus, a different peak that will one day become synonymous with their rule. Between these mountains lies not only physical distance, but a space thick with potential conflict. The 100-handers position themselves as massive anchors for Zeus's side. The Cyclopes prepare their forges, knowing that the war to come will require not only thunderbolts, but armor and tools worthy of divine hands. The crisis that forces revelation is the inevitability of encounter. Titans and Olympians cannot ignore one another forever. Messengers pass between them, perhaps carrying offers, demands, refusals that are not recorded in detail. Each side measures the other. Each weighs the cost of war against the cost of inaction. Kronos, who once acted swiftly against his father, now finds himself hesitating. his confidence worn thin by the reversal Zeus has already enacted within his own body. Zeus does not rush. The tone of the age he wishes to inaugurate is not wild chaos, but ordered freedom. He allows time for alliances to form, for old grievances to surface, for the neutral to declare themselves. He knows that when the first open clash comes, it will mark a turning point not only for divine lineages, but for the whole shape of the world. In the quiet before the storm, the story zooms once more. From the cosmic panorama of mountains facing each other across the sky, we move inward to the mind of Zeus as he looks upon his siblings and allies. He sees Hestia's steadiness, the calm flame that will later anchor every hearth. He sees Demeter's deep care for growth and sustenance. He sees Hera's fierce sense of honor and order. He sees Poseidon's restless strength, Hades' somber watchfulness. Around them stand the 100-handers, massive and ready, and the Cyclopes with their intense, focused gazes. Each presence is a thread in the tapestry of the coming age. Zeus understands that the war, though necessary, must not be allowed to shatter the very world he hopes to govern. The seas must not all boil. The earth must not crack beyond healing. The sky must not be torn open. He must aim his thunderbolts with care. His choices now will echo into the ages when mortals walk under his storms and pray for mercy or favor. The Titanomachy is not only a contest of strength, it is a test of how power will be handled when its scale is nearly absolute. As the first clashes approach, the boundaries between eras sharpen. The age of Kronos, which had stretched long and unchallenged, draws toward its end. The coming age of Zeus waits, still undefined, like a shoreline glimpsed through mist. The Titans stand for an older order, rooted in primal forces and heavy inheritance. The Olympians stand for a new balance in which different realms, sky, sea, underworld, are clearly apportioned, and each god's sphere is marked out with some care. Between those two visions lies the necessary violence of transition. The Titanomachy will last 10 years, according to the poets, a decade of struggle in which mountains are said to be thrown and the very earth shaken. Yet it is important to remember as we rest here at the threshold that the myth does not dwell on each clash with the detail of a battlefield chronicle. It speaks instead in broad strokes, allowing listeners to feel the weight of the conflict without being pulled into every blow. The war is real, but its description remains at a distance, as if the story itself understands the need for reverent space around the collision of such vast beings. For now, the moment is poised. The Titans on Othrys check their weapons and steel their resolve. The Olympians on Olympus test their thunderbolts, tighten their grip on trident and helm, and feel the ground's quiet support beneath their feet. The 100-handers stretch their many arms, their fingers brushing the air like branches moved by a rising wind. The Cyclopes feed fuel to their forges, the glow from below lighting their single eyes. The cosmos holds its breath. The old pattern of father and son, of sky and earth, of swallowing and freeing has led inevitably to this confrontation. Zeus, once a hidden child in a Cretan cave, now stands at the front of a new host. Kronos, once the bold youngest son who dared to raise the sickle, now feels the weight of age and consequence upon his shoulders. The first stones will soon be lifted. The first thunderbolt will soon be cast. The war of the gods, the Titanomachy, stands, ready to unfold, and with it the final shaping of an order that will guide both divine and mortal lives for ages yet to come. Not yet, the world seems to say as clouds gather over both mountains. Not yet, as waves roll more heavily against distant shores. Not yet, as the deep murmurs of Tartaros shift and listen. But the threads of fate are already drawn, and when the silence breaks, it will be with a sound that carries from Othrys to Olympus and far beyond, into every corner of a cosmos about to learn a new name for rule. The stillness between the mountains ends with sound. It does not begin with a shout, but with a low roll that deepens as it travels. Clouds gather over Olympus and Othrys, darkening like heavy lids lowered over watchful eyes. The first thunderbolt is not yet thrown, but its presence is already felt in the charged air, in the way leaves tremble on distant trees and waves stiffen along remote shores. When Zeus lifts his arm, the sky listens. The thunderbolt that the Cyclopes have fashioned for him hums with compressed light and sound, with the quiet weight of all the storms that might have fallen randomly but are now focused in one deliberate gesture. He is careful even now. The strike that follows does not aim to tear the world apart. It arcs instead toward the high slopes of Othrys, where Titans stand in their strength, and marks the beginning of a war that has been latent since the first separation of earth and sky. The Titans answer with their own forces. They are vast beings, older than their opponents, shaped in the era when mountains and rivers were still learning their courses. Hyperion brings light in a raw, burning form that can stun and scorch. Coeus and Creus move with the solid weight of direction and leadership, gathering their kin into formations that feel as inevitable as tides. Iapetus, whose descendants will wrestle with 1,000 mortal dangers, stands in a line that remembers the old order as something worth preserving. Stones are lifted, not pebbles, but boulders the size of hills. When the 100-handers hurl them, the air itself seems to bend. The Titans respond by tearing peaks from the shoulders of mountains, sending them crashing toward Olympus. The earth groans, but it holds. Seas rear up and crash down. Valleys tremble. The sounds of the Titanomachy are unlike any thunder or avalanche mortals will later know. Yet every storm that passes over a Greek hillside carries a faint echo of that first clash. Among the first to choose a side openly is Styx, daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. She brings her children to Zeus as allies. They are personifications of forces that will matter in all ages. Nike, victory, swift and steady; Kratos, strength; Bia, force; Zelos, emulation and eager rivalry. They stand beside Zeus and swear loyalty. In gratitude, he sets Styx's name upon the most sacred of waters. The river Styx in the underworld becomes the boundary where oaths of gods are made and cannot be broken. Even in this war, Zeus is already shaping a future doctrine. Power is bound not only by bolts and blades, but by promises that must hold. The first years of the war are marked by balance. The Titans have the advantage of age and established ground. They know Othrys as a body knows bone. The younger gods have the sharpness of recent injustice, the clarity born from being confined and released. Their blows are guided by a sense of necessity rather than habit. Yet neither side overcomes the other quickly. The Titanomachy becomes a long struggle in which days blur into years and years into a decade. From a distance, the conflict looks like a series of storms and earthquakes. Lightning flares between peaks, whole ridges crack and settle. The 100-handers standing with Zeus throw stone after stone, their many arms moving in arcs that turn mountains into missiles. The Titans answer with quakes that try to shake their enemies from Olympus. The sea, governed even now by unseen currents of Poseidon's emerging nature, rises and falls in patterns that reflect the tension between stability and change. The gods learn their roles in war as they will later embody them in peace. Hera stands near Zeus, fierce in her regard for rightful order and deeply offended by the long injustice of Kronos' swallowing of their siblings. Demeter feels every tremor as it affects the future fields, already thinking of how grain must one day grow in ground that has known such shaking. Hestia maintains the steady flame of resolve, a hearth fire carried symbolically in the heart of the council. Poseidon tests the reach of his trident, discovering how to draw on the deep power of the seas without letting them drown the world. Hades watches the casualties that fall into darkness, learning the contours of the place where souls will one day gather. Zeus, for his part, grows fully into his function as Sky Lord. He begins to understand that the thunderbolt is not only an instrument of destruction, it is a signal and a boundary. He throws it to break Titan lines, to shield allies, to mark limits that cannot be crossed without consequence. He does not aim it casually, because each strike leaves a mark on earth and sea. Where a bolt falls, a cliff may split or a new spring may open. The war becomes, in part, a shaping of the world's later geography. Oceanus remains mostly a part. His encircling river flows on, bearing witness without fully committing. Some titans, like Themis and Mnemosyne, align themselves more readily with the emerging order. Themis, embodiment of right order, sees in Zeus's approach a possibility of a stable distribution of realms. Mnemosyne, memory, preserves the record that will later allow mortals to tell these stories at all. Their support, even if quiet, contributes to the eventual tilt of the balance. Year after year, the war continues. From the perspective of mortals, if any exist in full awareness during this time, it might feel as if the sky has entered a restless phase. Seasons would be uncertain. Storms might linger longer than usual. The ground might tremble without warning. The Titanomachy is not fought on small fields. Its stage is the entire frame of the early cosmos. All the while, Gaia feels each impact. The Earth is both battlefield and participant. She has supported 2 rebellions already. She aided Kronos against Uranus. She aided Zeus against Kronos. Now she endures the blows of both sides. Each mountain throne is a piece of her body. Each valley reshaped is a line drawn across her skin. Her feelings are complex. She has helped birth every generation now at war. She has seen each of them in turn to imprisonment when threatened. Titans have been locked in Tartaros. Cyclopes and hundred-handers were confined. Kronos swallowed his children. Zeus has freed some and bound others, and she knows that whatever the outcome, another round of decisions about confinement and freedom will arise. The stalemate cannot last forever. Zeus searches for the move that will end the war without unmaking the world he wishes to govern. The answer lies in the full unleashing of the hundred-handers. Until now they have fought in formation, their strength impressive but not fully decisive. Zeus calls them aside and speaks to them with the respect due to allies who have suffered long imprisonment. He asks them to stand as the keystone of his final effort, to use all their force not in scattered throws but in one directed and enduring assault. Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges, the names that will be remembered for these beings, agree. They position themselves at strategic points. When the next clash begins, they do not simply hurl stones. They tear entire mountain ranges from their foundations and send them crashing down upon Othrys. The sky darkens with flying rock. The Titans are forced to shield themselves, to divert strength from offense to defense. Each thrown mass that lands near their stronghold alters the landscape, raising new barriers, opening new chasms, hemming them in. Zeus times his thunderbolts to strike as these stones fall. Each bolt cracks open a path through Titan formations or seals an attempted escape. Poseidon sends up surges from the sea to undermine the foundations of enemy footholds. Hades creates invisible channels into which fallen enemies sink, internal roads leading down toward the underworld that he will soon fully claim. Hera, Demeter, Hestia, and other allies fight in ways that align with their natures, sustaining the cohesion of Zeus's side and disrupting the efforts of those who still follow Kronos. The turning is not sudden in story, yet there is a day when the war's direction becomes clear. Othrys, once a high and open throne for Titan rule, becomes a ringed and partially buried height. The Titans find themselves surrounded by newly fallen mountains, by gorges carved by the impact of thrown stones, by shattered paths that once led easily down into the wider world. They are not yet entirely defeated, but their space of movement has shrunk. The young gods on Olympus conversely find that their footholds are more secure. Zeus senses that the time has come for a final push. The last confrontations between Zeus and Kronos are told without elaborate detail. They are father and son, each carrying the memory of what the other has done. Kronos remembers the sickle and the moment he struck Uranus. Zeus remembers the darkness his siblings endured in his father's belly and the narrow cave where he himself grew in hiding. Their clash is, in one sense, the precise fulfillment of Uranus's curse. In another sense, it is the necessary completion of a pattern that cannot be allowed to repeat forever. Zeus does not use a sickle. He wields thunder and the authority that has gathered around him. Kronos meets him with the stubborn strength that once challenged the sky itself. Their blows are felt in the bones of the world. When at last Kronos falls, it is less a gruesome scene than a slow collapse of an age. The Titan King is overcome, not annihilated. His rule breaks, his power yields. With Kronos' defeat, the resistance of the remaining Titans becomes unsustainable. Some yield and accept their fate. Others are dragged down. Zeus chooses the same prison that once held the Cyclopes and Hundred-Handers. He casts the defeated Titans into Tartaros, securing them behind walls and gates even stronger than before. The Hundred-Handers, freed and now trusted, are set as their guards. The arrangement is severe. It is also, in Zeus's mind, a necessary boundary. Those who cannot relinquish a dangerous order are placed where they can no longer disrupt the new. Gaia feels fresh pain when her Titan children are bound in this way. For all their faults, they are still her offspring. Her discontent will have consequences later. For now, however, the immediate result of Zeus's choice is a cosmos in which the old rulers are removed from the surface and the new ones stand upon mountain and sea with clear authority. The war of the gods ends. The air begins to clear. The ground settles, although it bears new scars and contours. The seas find calmer rhythms. From Olympus, Zeus looks out upon a world that has been shaken yet remains intact. The time has come to distribute responsibility in a way that prevents both the smothering closeness of Uranus and the devouring fear of Kronos from returning. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades cast lots to determine their realms. The method is simple and carries a sense of impartiality. Chance is allowed to speak alongside desire. Zeus receives the sky, the bright vault and the weather that moves across it. Poseidon receives the sea, the deep and shifting waters around and within the earth. Hades receives the underworld, the unseen realm where the dead will dwell. Earth itself remains common ground. No single god owns it completely. All move upon it according to their roles. This sharing is important. It means that the soil mortals walk upon is not the exclusive possession of one divine will. different gods will touch it through different functions. Demeter through grain, Artemis through wild places, Apollo through light and measured art, Hermes through paths and crossings, many others through their own domains. The distribution does not end with the three brothers. Hestia takes the hearth as her province, the steady central flame in every home and temple. Demeter claims the fertility of fields and the cycles of growth and harvest. Hera, as consort of Zeus, guards marriage and the bonds between households and cities. In time, other gods will join the council. Athena, drawn from Zeus's head after he swallows Metis. Apollo and Artemis, children of Leto. Hermes, child of Maia. Ares, Hephaestus, and others, each embodying forces and patterns within the world. Zeus's choice to swallow Metis, a goddess of cunning counsel, echoes the actions of his father and grandfather. He hears a prophecy that Metis's children might surpass him. His response reveals that the old pattern is not entirely broken. Yet the outcome is not the same. From that union emerges Athena, fully formed from his head, not from his belly. The swallowing brings wisdom inside rather than removing children from the world. Athena stands beside him as a goddess of justice in war and clear thought in peace. Zeus, while repeating an earlier gesture, transforms its meaning. The tendency to fear replacement remains, but it is tempered by the recognition that allies and offspring can strengthen rather than doom his rule. With realms apportioned and the main council formed, a new doctrine quietly takes hold. The cosmos will be governed not by a single figure hoarding every function, but by a group in which each has a sphere. Oaths sworn in the name of the gods bind rulers and citizens alike. Hospitality or xenia becomes a sacred bond watched over by Zeus himself. Those who abuse guests or violate the protection of suppliants offend not only mortals but the very structure of divine law. The war that established this order recedes, leaving behind principles that will shape the fate of countless lives. The human consequence of the Titanomachy unfolds slowly. Under Kronos, mortals were said to live in a golden age. They did not age as harshly, did not labor with tools of bronze and iron, did not fight in organized wars. With Zeus's rule comes a more complex world. Times of peace alternate with times of strife. Seasons become more sharply marked. Death becomes a clearer boundary. Yet the new order includes protections the old did not offer. Fire, stolen by Prometheus and later regulated by Zeus, allows mortals to cook, to craft, to gather in warmth. Law and custom rooted in divine expectations give shape to communities. Temples rise on hillsides and in city centers. Within them, altars are set where smoke from offerings curls upward toward the sky, or outward toward the sea, or symbolically, downward toward the underworld. Each sacrifice is a small reenactment of the agreements that followed the Titanomachy. Mortals acknowledge that power resides beyond them. The gods in turn attend to the offerings, granting favor, sending omens, or withholding rain when offended. The war of the gods becomes a distant foundational memory behind these rituals, like the unseen bedrock beneath a house. Yet the story of threats to Zeus's order does not end with the Titans. Gaia, sorrowful and angry at the imprisonment of her children in Tartaros, turns once more to creation. This time she joins with Tartaros itself, the deep pit, and from that union arises a new and terrible figure. Typhon, or Typhoeus, emerges as a living challenge to Zeus, a monstrous being whose scale and fury echo the earliest chaos before form. Descriptions of Typhon vary. Some say he is taller than any mountain, his head brushing the stars. Others say he has serpents in place of legs, a tangled mass of coils that spread across the land. His arms may be immense and tireless. Flames are said to flicker from his eyes. His voice, when he speaks or roars, is a blend of many sounds, like all animals crying out at once. In every version, he embodies disorder and overwhelming force, an answer from Gaia to Zeus's hard treatment of her Titan sons. Typhon strides toward Olympus, and the gods feel a new kind of fear. This is not the familiar strength of Titans, rooted in order and family lines, but something more raw. Some gods flee temporarily to distant places, taking on disguises in a few versions of the tale. Zeus remains. He understands that if this threat is not faced, the entire structure he has built will collapse. The Titanomachy will have achieved nothing lasting. The clash between Zeus and Typhon is the most intense single combat of Zeus's long rule. Thunderbolts fly in rapid succession. Each one strikes Typhon's vast body, sending bursts of light into the dark air. Typhon responds with storms of his own, hurling rocks, breathing fire, shaking the ground. Mountains shudder, seas rise. The sky seems to ripple like torn cloth. Once again, the cosmos becomes a battlefield, not for a decade this time, but in a concentrated storm of effort. In some stories, Typhon gains the upper hand, at least for a time. He wounds Zeus, cutting the tendons from his hands and feet, leaving him unable to wield his thunderbolt. Zeus is taken to a distant cave guarded by a monster called Delphine, half maiden and half serpent. The cosmos in that moment hangs in a precarious balance, yet companions such as Hermes and a goat-like figure called Egipan intervene. They recover Zeus's sinews, restore them to his limbs, and free him. The pattern repeats at a smaller scale. Aid comes from unexpected quarters. Cunning and loyalty complement strength. Once restored, Zeus returns to the fight with renewed understanding of his own vulnerability. He no longer underestimates Typhon. He uses both force and strategy, drawing Typhon into positions where his size becomes a disadvantage. At last, Zeus overpowers him, striking with thunderbolts that pin the monster beneath the earth. Tradition often places Typhon under Mount Etna in Sicily. The volcano's eruptions, its smoke and molten rock, are understood as Typhon's trapped fury, the last expressions of a defeated but not entirely silenced threat. With Typhon subdued, Zeus's rule gains a new depth of legitimacy. He has not only overthrown an unjust father and imprisoned dangerous titans, he has also faced and contained a force of near primordial chaos. Gaia's protest, embodied in Typhon, has been answered. The earth still grumbles in earthquakes and vents fire in volcanoes, reminders that deep tensions remain. But the overall structure holds. The sky stays with Zeus. The sea stays with Poseidon. The underworld stays with Hades. The council on Olympus reconvenes with a clearer sense of its own fragility and responsibility. In later generations, another conflict will rise. The Gigantomachy, a battle between the gods and giants also born from the blood of Uranus. Gaia, still dissatisfied, urges them against the Olympians. A prophecy declares that the gods can win only if a mortal fights alongside them. Heracles, son of Zeus and a mortal woman, eventually serves that role. His arrows, guided by divine strategy, help bring down the giants. This war stands as a bridge between divine and human stories. It shows that the order founded in the Titanomachy is not purely a matter of distant, unreachable beings. Mortal courage and effort are woven into its maintenance. Through all these trials, Zeus adapts. He is not a static figure who merely throws lightning at every inconvenience. He learns when to negotiate as with the division of realms among his brothers and the granting of honors to deities like Hecate who supported him early. He learns when to restrain his impulse to eradicate potential threats, as in the case of Athena, who becomes a pillar of his own regime, or Thetis, whom he chooses to marry to a mortal to avoid a prophecy rather than confronting her directly. The doctrine that emerges from his long rule is built on several pillars. Power must be shared and clearly defined. Oaths must bind even the gods. Guests and suppliants must be protected so that travelers and the vulnerable can move through the world without constant terror. Sacrifices and prayers must be answered in some way, even if the answer is sometimes a quiet refusal. Storms must come, but not in endless succession. Seas must rage, but harbors must also exist where ships can rest. For mortals, the memory of the Titanomachy and its aftershocks becomes a background hum. They tell stories of the war of the gods around fires under skies that occasionally crack with thunder. They imagine the stones under their feet as remnants of mountains once hurled in that ancient conflict. They explain earthquakes and eruptions by pointing toward the bound Titans and Typhon, moving restlessly in their bonds. In this way, the myth becomes both explanation and reassurance. The world is not random. Its tremors have a history. On Olympus, the hall where the gods gather is bright and open. Pillars rise toward a ceiling that seems to merge with the sky itself. From this vantage, Zeus can see the distant shimmer of the sea, the green and brown patchwork of lands, the white cap of snowy peaks, the faint coil of smoke rising from human settlements. He presides over councils where disputes between gods are heard and settled. Hera argues for honor and stability. Athena counsels with measured reason. Apollo and Artemis speak for clarity and restraint. Hermes moves between realms carrying messages, ensuring that decisions made on high reach the mortal world. Zeus remembers the cave in Crete, the taste of goat's milk and honey, the muffled sound of the curate's dance. He remembers the day he served Kronos as cupbearer, the weight of the potion in the bowl, the moment his father retched and brought forth the swallowed gods. He remembers the descent to Tartaros, the freeing of Cyclopes and 100-handers, the feeling of their shackles breaking. These memories sit beneath his throne like stones laid in careful foundation. They remind him that his rule is not a gift taken without cost. It is the result of choices that carry ongoing obligations. Sometimes when storms gather over Olympus, Zeus walks alone along the mountain's edge. Lightning flickers at his fingertips, but he does not always send it downward. He listens to the wind which once flowed unclaimed between sky and earth. He senses the faint, distant presence of Kronos in Tartaros, of Uranus far above his sky without voice, of Gaia's deep patience and occasional anger. He knows that the pattern of father and son, of overthrow and succession, still exists as a possibility. The mythic tradition hints at future ages, of men of bronze and iron, of heroes who may challenge even gods, of times when the current order will feel old. Yet he also feels the threads of necessity that run through the whole story. Chaos gave way to Gaia and Uranus. Their union produced titans. Fear led to imprisonment. Imprisonment prompted rebellion. Rebellion opened space for a more articulated world, with realms and rules and relationships. In this perspective, the Titanomachy is not only a war. It is the moment when the cosmos learns to differentiate without collapsing into total conflict. The zoom widens again. The sky arches over a world where shepherds guide flocks along rocky hillsides and sailors study stars as they cross dark waters. In distant sanctuaries, priests and priestesses prepare offerings, cutting grain, pouring wine, singing hymns. In each city, laws are written under the gaze of gods whose images stand in temples. Children hear stories of Zeus and Kronos, of Titans and Typhon, of a war so vast that mountains moved. They fall asleep, imagining thunderbolts and flying rocks. But also courts on Olympus where justice is debated and decided. The war of the gods resides in these tales like a deep bass note beneath a melody. It gives weight to the idea that order is not arbitrary. When kings abuse their power, poets can remind them that even Kronos fell. When strangers are mistreated, storytellers can invoke Zeus Xenios, guardian of guests, whose authority rests partly on his memory of a world where law did not yet protect the vulnerable. When earthquakes shake the ground, people can say that perhaps a titan shifted in chains, that the binding of old dangers is never entirely without movement. In later philosophical ages, thinkers will speak of a cosmos ordered by a divine mind, or by impersonal principles, or by a hierarchy of causes. Yet the older memory remains underneath those abstractions. Before there were systems and treatises, there were stories of Gaia and Uranus, of Kronos and Zeus, of the Titans hurling stones and the 100-handers answering. These stories carry a different kind of truth, one that moves through images and rhythms rather than definitions. They say that power may become fearful and consuming, that new generations may be swallowed by the old, that the earth herself may suffer under such arrangements, and that change, when it comes, is both necessary and dangerous. The Titanomachy in this light is a meditation on how rule begins and how it stabilizes. It suggests that the cosmos did not arrive at its current balance without contest. It acknowledges that the gods themselves have histories, mistakes, and learning curves. Zeus, though a victor, is not without flaw. Kronos, though cruel, acted under the weight of his own father's threat. Uranus, though oppressive, was the first sky to arch over Earth at all. Each generation carries both the gifts and the wounds of the previous one. For those who listen to the story in a quiet room, with night pressing gently against the windows and the soft sound of their own breath in their ears, the Titanomachy can feel like a distant storm that is already past. The thunder of thrown mountains and cracking bolts fades into a kind of steady hum. Like the far-off surf of a sea heard from a sheltered cove, the cosmos has been shaken and settled. The gods have taken their places. The world above and below has found a pattern it can maintain for a long time. Still, within that pattern there is room for choice. Mortals may honor the gods or ignore them. Kings may rule justly or harshly. Travelers may extend hospitality or refuse it. Farmers may trust in Demeter's cycles or try to hoard in ways that break community bonds. The myths of the Titanomachy and its allied tales offer a background against which these choices occur. They say that order itself was once contested, that the shape of sky and sea and underworld was decided, not given, and that those decisions carry responsibility. When sleep comes, it often arrives in layers. First, the conscious mind relaxes its grip on names and lists. Then images from the day dissolve into slower patterns. Behind those patterns, deeper ones wait. The Titanomachy belongs to that deeper layer where archetypal stories about conflict and resolution rest quietly. Years and cultures may change, but the idea of a war in heaven, of a struggle between old and new, of a final balance emerging from upheaval appears again and again. In the Greek tradition, that war has specific names. Zeus, Kronos, Othris, Olympus, Cyclopes, 100-handers, Tartaros, Typhon. yet the emotional contour is widely shared. Listeners feel the tension of the young challenging the old, the fear of being replaced, the pain of confinement, the relief of liberation, the risk that new rulers might repeat old mistakes, the hope that they will instead learn and improve. The story we have followed begins in a formless gap, with chaos and the first edges of Gaia. It passes through the smothering closeness of Uranus, the bold stroke of Kronos, the devouring fear that swallows children, the hidden cave where Zeus grows, the quiet cup that frees the swallowed gods, the descent to Tartaros, the gift of thunderbolt and trident and helm, the 10-year war between Othrys and Olympus, the fall of Titans into the very darkness they used against others, the eruption of Typhon and his final subdual. It ends not in a silence of emptiness, but in a quiet where order and possibility coexist. Above all, the Titanomachy teaches that even among immortals there is change. The gods of Olympus are not the first to hold power. They may not be the last. For a long span, however, they are the ones whose decisions shape the fate of earth and sea and sky. Their counsels, loves, quarrels, and interventions will fill many other stories. Heroes will call on them. Cities will claim them as patrons. Philosophers will interpret them. Statues will rise in their honor. Behind each of those later tales, the war of the gods remains like a faint pattern woven into the fabric of a cloak. It may not be visible in every fold, but it is there, giving structure to the whole. When thunder rolls over a Greek hillside at night, when a volcano sends fire into the sky, when the ground trembles and then rests, listeners can remember that once the cosmos itself learned to balance force and restraint, fear and courage, confinement and freedom. In that remembrance there is a kind of calm. The storms have already come and gone in their greatest form. What remains are lesser echoes, powerful enough to command respect but not enough to unmake the world with every season. Under the rule of Zeus and his kin, life continues in cycles of seed and harvest, of birth and death, of love and loss. The war of the gods is complete. Its traces lie in myth and in stone, in the shape of mountains and the stories told beside the hearth. And as the mind drifts toward rest, the figures of Gaia and Uranus, of Kronos and Zeus, of Titans hurling rocks and hundred-handers answering from the other side, grow softer at the edges. They recede toward the horizon of memory, becoming a distant line where sky meets sea. The cosmos they shaped remains, steady enough for sleep to settle upon it like a gentle closing hand.